Evening and welcome to the Sunday show here at Four Lads Had a Dream, the podcast network for you guys, the Rangers fans, which I'm sure will be, we kind of expect a busy one tonight. My name's Scott Patterson. If you're joining us on YouTube or Facebook or X, as always, we're really grateful for joining us. And before I introduce my podders tonight, I want to say hi to our sponsors who look after the Sunday show for this season. iSport Media will look after us between now and whatever happens in May next year. I should also say hi to our podcast partners for the duration of the season: Black Rooster, CSD Air Conditioning, Athol Industrial Solutions, Rhino Express and Clyde View Joinery, supporting us for the duration of the season. Dougie, how are you?
Deflated, Scott. But before we get into the shambles that is Rangers, I just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of people, because I was down in London this week, as you know, and our very own Andrew from the pod had me along to the London Rangers Supporters Association on Thursday for some beverages. Game aside, it was good to catch up with one of our fellow podders. It did make for my meeting the next day and a very ropey flight on the way home to be interesting. But even in the flight home, I met a member of the Dartford Rangers Supporters Association who listens to the pod as well, a guy called Rab, who was up for a wedding yesterday. I hope he had a great weekend. But it shows the reach of the podcast, even in the horrible times of following Rangers. It's great to have the community.
Yeah, indeed. Totally agreed. Good evening to the guys if they are tuning in tonight. Rob, how's it going?
Hi. Another wonderful weekend ruined by the football. I'm looking forward to this group therapy session that we're about to hold. So, yeah, it's nice. It's going to be nice to chat through it and hopefully put it to the back of our memory and got on with a week ahead. But yeah, football ruins another good weekend.
And last, by no means least, Sheryl, how are you?
You saving the best for last. Rangers aside, I am hungover but very happy. I had a lovely group therapy session with Andrew, Andy and Stevie on Friday night, where I didn't think things could get much worse. Yet here we are. So it's nice to have yet another group therapy session. And can I say a big thank you as well? Much like Dougie, I have had a lot of interaction with people online today, on social media, on X, on Instagram, etc. And it's just really good to know that we're all, for once, for a support that can be quite divided at times. I think we're all on the same page, and we all feel the same. So there's a wee bit of encouragement and comfort in that as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. So listen, let's just start with our cards on the table. I think we've all seen we've all got WhatsApp, so we've all seen the rumours. To our knowledge, there has been nothing happened as yet. From a personal opinion, and I think it's easy to forget that we've got a game to discuss. We will get that to that at some point tonight. But I think from a personal perspective, my own sort of personal perspective, cards on the table, I think Rangers now have a duty to let Russell Martin go, and whatever way they choose to announce that is entirely up to them. However, I think Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Marat owe it to the support, the existing playing staff, who I'm certain will come to over the next 40 minutes or so, and to Russell Martin, importantly, himself. I don't imagine all of this that's going on is particularly good for him as a person stroke man. So some people like that, some people won't. From the football club perspective, I think it's better off that he's no longer Rangers manager as of, if not tonight, then certainly tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Dougie, fair? I imagine you're in the same place as me on that.
Yeah, Sheryl said, I think I support unanimous in our thinking at the moment. It's potentially only the board that are thinking otherwise. Some of us have thought it since day one of the appointment that he was the wrong man and wanted to be proven wrong. Russell Martin's probably the only person right now watching Rangers thinking it's getting better. There is certainly no signs of that. What was it, 2 shots today against Falkirk? And the reality, and I know we're going to talk about the game, right? But the reality is you could literally play any of our podcasts from any post-match games. Easy to play through, create nothing. There, end of podcast. Let's talk about Russell Martin. He needs to go, right? I had a conversation with my mate Andy beforehand, and I understand we're in a cycle right now. We've been continuously letting go of managers because it's not been working. And at some point, we had to try and stop that cycle, right? But at the same time, Russell Martin's not the guy that you back. You know, I understand why the board have sat back and tried to give them a bit of time. They've tried to see if they can turn this around because they've had to try and change that cycle. But it's now up to them. It's their responsibility now to recognise that it's not going to work. They need to relieve him of his duties. We've got a great opportunity just now with it being an international break. And it's now up to them to find a replacement, not to ask supporters who the next Rangers manager should be. It's going to be an interesting 24 hours. I don't think he'll go well for your pod live just now, but I'd be very surprised if the guys are on the podcast tomorrow night doing the flagship show and they're not talking about Russell Martin departing.
Rob, it's one of the things that I think has often been levelled at Russell Martin has been when he has spoken before and after matches. So the lead up to the games and maybe some bits and pieces, some sound bites you get from him. But more importantly, I think what you're getting after the matches. Don't forget 1-7 in the league, and today was really no different. The two quotes that I will be levelled against them, whatever happens tonight and tomorrow, I think two quotes that will be levelled against them was, we have improved and you can't just win. So the level of improvement, I think, is certainly up for debate, which I'm happy for you to take on. And latterly, it's all about winning. I've spoken this pod for weeks now when we get together on a Sunday, and do you know what I mean? I don't care if they run for each other. I don't care how hard they run. I don't care how anxious they are. I don't really give a toss about their mentality, but I need them to win. I need them to win. It's as simple as that. Those two quotes, I think, will be levelled against them, whatever happens, as I say, over the next 24 hours.
I think there's more than those quotes that you could probably level at him as well, Scotty, to be honest, mate, because it's got to the point where I kind of tune in to listen to him, but then I just zone out because it's the same guff that you hear game after game. You know, listening to him gives me anxiety, never mind the players stepping onto the pitch under him. And you're right, you know, Russell Martin probably does say that you can't just win because he can't. You know, we've won, 5 games in 17? We're sitting, 8th in the league after 7 league games. It's unacceptable for a Rangers team to be sitting in that position as it stands just now. And I think he's obviously trying to talk himself into that things are better than they actually are, and everybody can see he's just massively out of his depth. He's sticking to a system that he's trying to implement in a league that is just tearing them apart. And you know, some of the games that we've even played in Europe, which used to be the thing that we could point to when we've had a good domestic or a bad domestic season, we're getting absolutely pillaged by teams that are average at best. And it's all because we're far too wide open. You know, we don't create enough. You know, like you said at the top, 2 shots on target today against Falkirk, and that was us with 61% possession of the game. You know, they had 39% and created three clear cut chances at least in that second half, scored. So it's the ultimate combination of a system manager rather than somebody that just tweak things to win games. And ultimately, that's what you need to do as Rangers manager. It's not about a style of play. It's just simply winning football games. And many managers that have came before Martin have managed to find a way of doing that. And that is about adjusting to the game that's in front of you and not trying to constantly do the same things over and over again, overcoach players to take the creativity out of them. Because, you know, you look at Ant-Man as a prime example, 17 assists and 7 goals last year in Holland. And he comes here and he looks like he's never played a game of football in his life. And he's actively changing the way players play to get worse rather than improvement, which is the mantra that he gave us when he first came in. You know, it's all about making everybody in the building better and getting them to be better human beings and better football players. But I don't think anybody's improved under him.
No, and I think that's a great point. I don't see anyone getting better. Sheryl, indeed, I think there's a real argument that the squad we had last season under Philippe Clement and Barry Ferguson latterly is better than the group that have been cobbled together now. The Russell Martin came up here with a reputation. I don't think there's any doubt about that as a coach and how things had maybe went from previously at his previous clubs, Southampton, Swansea, etc. And indeed, I think we all saw the tweet fellow podcaster colleague of mine had shared when each club he's been in, he's had a reference to make about mentality, which is a portrait failing through each of these teams, and he has failed each of these teams. The thing that maybe worries me most about the you just can't win thing, Sheryl, is that if you were talking about a guy who had never been before, if he'd never been at Ibrox before, he'd never played for Rangers before, but we're talking about a guy that's been here. Now, there's an argument that he was here at a really unsuccessful time. I get that. I understand that. Expectation was really, really different back then. But he should know the importance of winning for the football club, surely.
Yeah, and you know, it's a point that I've made a few times, Scotty, when he knew, obviously, a while before we did, that he was getting this job. He said that he had watched several of our games. He knows the league. He has been up here, whether it was a bad time for us or whatever. He knows the expectation. He knows how poor we were towards the end of the bulk of last season, but particularly towards the end of last season. So he came into this having done, I believe, 7 interviews, and he knows exactly what he was coming into. And the thing that was really telling for me was when he was asked, I think a few weeks ago, what have you improved? He couldn't answer. The answer wasn't, and it was unreal, you'll need to ask my backroom team. No, you say. Right, you say what you're doing. A point that I made the same as Rob, but I mean, look at Ant-Man. Dire. You know, I don't believe these players are as bad as they're looking just now. You look at Joe Rothwell. Now, I didn't see him a lot at Leeds, but I know people who did watch him and said, again, he's nowhere near as poor as he is for us. He's playing a lot of players out of position. He's so wedded to this system that clearly doesn't work. And the one thing, I don't know if I mentioned it on Friday or not, but the one thing we seen in the second half was when we changed things up, went to 2 up front, we were far more successful, but there was nothing surer than he was going to revert to that same kind of target style of play that doesn't work. He reverted to it today, and why? I don't know. It's not working. It didn't work at Livy. He changed it in the second half, and we were very lucky to get away with the 3 points there. But we all knew, we knew that he was going to revert back to type today. It doesn't work. It's not going to work. And as we said on Friday, the only time it does work is when he has to completely change things because it's not working.
Scott, I don't want to spiral out of control here, right? But the worry that I've got is we can remove Russell Martin overnight, bring somebody else in. There are bigger problems than the manager right now as well. We had a new ownership come in the summer, and everyone had an absolute buzz thinking, this is it. You know, we've been through some really horrible times recently. We thought, this is it. We're going to kick on massively. I'm really concerned about the new ownership now, because these guys have came in, they've backed us financially, they've given us some money to spend. But what I hoped we would get from the new ownership was a team that knew how to run a football club successfully, and they would have the blueprint, they would have a infrastructure behind the scenes that they could share across all the clubs. And actually, if you look right now at the 3 clubs in the Scottish top flight that are owned by a kind of similar model, the worry that I've got right now is we are comparing ourselves to Leeds, for example, as part of that same team. Hibs are compared to Bournemouth. Hearts are under the same leadership right now as Brighton. Which one of those 3 clubs have got the best model in place? And my worry right now is, if we get rid of Russell Martin, right, the ownership of appointed guys like Patrick Stewart as CEO, we've got Dan Purdy, we've got Kevin Thelwell, we've got Kevin Thelwell's son, his gran, whoever else is involved in the club now. Are these the guys that we trust to, 1, replace Russell Martin, 2, sign the right guys that are going to take us forward? And that's where I'm really concerned right now. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, you know, I always had this kind of issue in the previous ownership around, as supporters, we put a lot of our hard-earned money into the football club and we want to see the return. And the previous ownership, their heart was in the right place, but they didn't make use of our money in the best possible way. We wasted so many millions, from court cases to compensation payoffs. We're almost back at square one again, where we're going to be making payoffs. Pay off Russell Martin, where does it stop? Because I tell you something right now, Russell Martin should not be the only person responsible for this who leaves Ibrox.
So I completely agree with that. It's one of the things that I was going to come to next, and Neil's kind of brought it up. I do think we're staring into a huge moment for the 49ers here, to be perfectly honest with you. I think it's easy to say that Russell Martin has to go. There are other people that are complicit with that as well, and the light has to shine on Kevin Thirlwell and Patrick Stewart, and probably the other guys that are in and around that whole sort of recruitment process, whoever they are. I was quite surprised that Patrick Stewart kept his job after the 49ers came in, because he wasn't one of their guys, as far as I'm aware. But I am surprised that, listen, they've not dodged it by any manner of means. But Sheryl, the big thing for me is that if we do have a situation where Russell Martin does leave and we are scrambling for someone else to come in, we are instantly going to turn the next page on this Thelwell and Stewart playbook and ask them to go and get the next Rangers manager who is going to come in and crucially win games, because that is of paramount importance. Do we trust them to do it?
No, absolutely not. And I even think, I'm sure there'll be more people interviewed than we know about, but even the two that they had lined up, that was a massive concern for me as well.
Yeah.
Ancelotti and Martin seemed to be the front runners there. There was different stories about Ancelotti kind of playing them, but even that kind of selection process for me, we've heard 7 interviews, but I think there's huge concerns around their judgment and their ability to, when the inevitable happens, which I'm positive now that it will, to get that decision right. The unfortunate thing is, we're now under this, that there's nothing else that can kind of happen with this. We have this group in charge of us. The only thing we can hope is that they have a look at the role of Patrick Stewart and Thelwell in this, and then make the appropriate changes. I said on Friday, whether he's an Aberdeen supporter or not is irrelevant, but Patrick Stewart doesn't get us. He doesn't get us as a club. He doesn't get us as a fan base. He showed that very early on with the whole banner thing at the Old Firm game. He doesn't get us. He doesn't come over very well. We've seen the clips online after Thursday as well. It's a bit credit, I suppose, to Thelwell to actually stop and engaging with the supporters that spoke to him. But Patrick Stewart kind of just smugly smiled and walked on. He just doesn't get us. He shouldn't be anywhere near our club.
Yeah. Rob, do you think the takeover feels like a million years ago? I mean, it genuinely does. I was thinking about this during the week. I remember watching Stevie on the pod after it went off, and I remember looking at it and thinking, goodness me. This is a huge deal, big news, and something to be really excited and pleased about. The very obvious argument now is that feeling of excitement, a bit of anticipation, almost with our first big appointment, has really been a bit of a letdown.
Absolutely. I think all the goodwill and excitement from that summer has evaporated very, very quickly. And I think there was a lot of us that were really underwhelmed by the news that Martin was going to be manager. But I think the vast majority of fans were willing to give it a chance based on some of the stuff that we'd heard and seen around how the team was going to be playing under him. Yeah. I think what transpired very quickly was that we were nowhere near the high press, high intensity, attacking, swashbuckling side that we thought we were going to get under him, and that we could see that we were far too open and that we were slow and turgid on the ball. And if that was never going to change, then it was doomed to failure. And I think making mistakes is fine. It's been able to rectify them quickly. We've seen it across clubs in Europe since the start of the season. Erik ten Hag gets removed from the Bayer Leverkusen role. What is it, after 2 days, something like that? You've got Graham Potter that gets sacked fairly quickly, and then Nuno was replaced, his replacement, fairly quickly again. They made the decision to sack Nuno at Forest. So there's things you can do to quickly steer the direction of the ship. And that's the situation they face. But like Sheryl said there, do we actually trust this group of individuals to make the right appointment? And I think the other thing, it's who was involved in that process in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, I remember when the 49ers group first came in, there was a lot of talk of what was it? Is it Greta Steinson, who was the football man for them? Was he involved in it? Because ultimately, the next appointment is going to be critical. And whether that is going to be an interim or a full-time role, but ultimately, like Sheryl says, they're here to stay. I think we've got a chance by getting the right individual in. We'll get the fans on board pretty quickly, and if we can see at least some positive results and a bit of steel in the team very quickly, then the fans will start to maybe get excited and get behind it again. Because ultimately, we're still in 2 cup competitions. We're 1 game away from a final. So if we can at least get that, it ramps up the positivity. And I know I might be ludicrous in what I'm about to say, but ultimately, if you can start to get a team playing together, there's a potential that you could get back in the title race. Now, we're miles away from that just now, and if we keep Martin until Christmas, we're going to be screwed at that point. But for us, it's about them recognising the mistake and taking action quickly, because that's the thing that will help the fans at least say, right, well, they've given them a bit of time, which they had to do because that was their first big decision they had to make. They've actually given them quite a bit of cash to spend, so they've obviously got to give them some time to, once the transfer window's closed and everybody's mind's on playing for Rangers, then it's going to get better, and it just hasn't transpired like that. So you'd like to think that change will be afoot, but it's how rigorous and how thorough that process is going to be that everybody will be concerned about, because we can't make another mistake like Martin.
Absolutely, and indeed on that change, I'm aware that the chat is going mad, as you probably expect. I get that, and we're aware that Sky Sports are reporting tonight that there is movement, and there could very well be an announcement of sorts at some point tomorrow. I believe our colleagues across Heart and Hand are reporting something very similar, so they're welcome for the name check in the first instance. Sky, I'm talking about, of course. We can't swing by the players, Dougie, in this as much as anything else. Now, I remember speaking to BBC Scotland months and months ago. Michael Beale's in charge, actually, and I had a great conversation with Stuart Kettlewell, who was in charge at Motherwell at the time. It was shortly before he left, and things were getting a little bit noisy for him. And I remember saying to him, a manager's responsibility effectively goes as far as the white line, and when the players cross the white line, hands up. Do you know what I mean? You need to hope that they take on board what you've worked on during the week. They are good enough to execute what you're trying to do. And your responsibility at that point comes down ever so slightly. We've got a couple of really bad apples, I think, that have been around now for a good few years, and arguably 3 or 4 of them are getting away with coasting and have done with the last 3 or 4 managers. That's a worry. And I think, to be fair, Russell Martin's maybe came in and tried to mix it up a little bit and tried to understand what the problem is. He's not been able to sort that. For whatever reason, I don't know. I think a lot of that's down to maybe methodologies at the training centre and the way he's wanting the team to play. The importance of the next person, whoever it is that comes in, assuming Russell Martin does leave the football club tomorrow, getting the weeding done is really important tomorrow morning.
So I'm glad you've spoken about the players, Scott, because they shouldn't get away with without also being criticised. You can literally go through the manager, the leadership above him, the owners. The players also deserve criticism because today's performance was unacceptable. There was just so many basic mistakes today. Passing off, no runs being made, and that's on the players. The effort wasn't there. We've always said since Russell Martin took over, and we always knew it was going to be a process, that we'd be a wee bit more on board if we've seen the progress, particularly within the players. We're not seeing that at all. But I actually dispute your comment around looking at the previous players, because if you take today in isolation, there's probably only 2 players, maybe 3, that got credit from today's game, and they were all players that were here last season. So if it wasn't for Jack Butland, the scoreline would have been significantly more. I
Correct.
thought Connor Barron covered a lot of ground and put in a good shift. And, you know, I think you're hinting about the captain, Scott, when you're talking about the Whedon needing done. The captain was one of our best players on the pitch today. The difficulty, if you use James Tavernier as an example, right? I always talk about James Tavernier because so many other managers have tried to phase him out. We tried to bring in Dujon Sterling to phase James Tavernier out, but he was made of glass. We've went and we've signed Max Aarons, who, let's be honest, he's an English Premiership midfielder on high wages that we could not afford his transfer fee to replace James Tavernier, and James Tavernier's taking his jersey back off him again. And that's where you can go down the big circle again. So the players absolutely deserve massive criticism, but I don't think it should be isolated to the guys that were here last season, because actually I'm more looking at guys like Max Aarons and thinking, we've spent big money on bringing you here on loan. Not only are you not good enough, but you're a coward. Your comments about being afraid of the supporters suggest that you're not getting the right mentality for this football club. And whose fault's that? That's Kevin Thelwell's responsibility. And that's where I look a little bit stupid right now, because I actually said at the beginning of the season that I thought we'd recruited reasonably well, and actually with a different manager, we'd be able to get more out of these players.
Yep.
You know, I think Sheryl had said earlier on about Joe Rothwell. When I was down in London this week for work, one of the guys in the team is a Leeds fan, and he cannot believe that Joe Rothwell's not in our midfield, because according to him, he would have signed Joe Rothwell to start every week in the English Premiership for Leeds. That's not the Joe Rothwell that we are seeing at Rangers. And we had all these positive reports about Tello Asgard and so on. We are not seeing the best versions of these players. And for me, there's then the question of, is that the manager that's not getting the best out of these players and the system that he is playing, or is it the players? Is it the players don't have the right mentality to play for this football club? And it's only going to take us to bring in a manager with the right mentality for this football club, because it's not Dick Avocado, right? It needs to be, say for instance, right, I'm not saying Steven Gerrard's the answer, right? But you go and get a Steven Gerrard, a Sean Dyche, a Kevin Muscat, right? I'm not saying that's who I would go and appoint, right? But every single one of these guys are hardened football men that just want to win football games, right? You would very quickly learn through their team selection who are the guys who are up for the fighting. Because there's two things about playing for Rangers. You need to be good enough, but you also need to be mentally strong enough. And guys like Max Aarons certainly isn't. And it's the reason why he's not in the team and James Tavernier still is. But look at that starting 11 today. And I'm just going to touch very briefly and lastly on Mikey Moore, right? I never understood the Mikey Moore signing. We signed a 17-year-old from Spurs on loan, right? Yeah. And if rumours are to be believed, we paid a loan fee greater than a transfer fee for Jedi Kasama when we signed Mikey Moore. Now, you can question whether there's contract obligations and that's why he continually has played in the starting 11. But when you sign somebody for that amount of money who's only here for 12 months, he is here to play, right? Contract obligations aside, you can't go and spend that amount of money for a loan player and have him on the bench. It's terrible business, right? Mikey Moore is absolutely, and I'm not wanting to pick out one player, right? It's awful to do that. I don't want to single out one player, but Mikey Moore sums up everything for me that's wrong with our transfer strategy in the summer. We've signed a boy, and we're putting a boy out in the pitch in tough games and tough moments when you get fans on his back, expecting him. You know, he's a creative player. We're not creating right now, so you're expecting an 18-year-old to be the one to go out and create something and do something for us. And that's not fair. I can't remember what Russell Martin's comment was about not being able to win consistently because we don't have seasoned professionals. So is he pointing the finger at Kevin Thelwell then for signing 17-year-olds like Mikey Moore on loan and saying that actually the recruitment was the problem? So I won't spiral too much, but I think players absolutely deserve the criticism. But right now, it will take me until a new manager comes in with a Rangers mentality to determine whether it's the players that are the problem or if it's the manager system.
So
I think it's probably a combination of. I was going to say, I think it's a combination of both, though, Dougie, mate. You know, I think the players definitely need to take responsibility once they're on that pitch, but ultimately they'll be asked to play in a system and positions that they probably don't believe in, which is also part of the problem. Now, I fully agree with the experience point, because ultimately, you know, we have signed a lot of young boys, but then you've got players like Tav, Butland, Suter, you know, boys that are experienced, but they haven't won much, which is the problem. And in those tough moments, they're the ones that need to be having a word in Mikey Moore's ear. The problem we've got is the experienced players in our team are too quiet. They're not the kind of people that go and do that on the pitch, or go and do that to those players to help them through those tough moments. And you know, that's one of the biggest failings that we've got at the moment as a team. On the Moore point, I still don't understand why Wee Curtis hasn't been given more minutes in that position. When you look at the contribution that he's made, you know, what is it, 3 goals, 1 assist in the 6 appearances that he's had. He's done more in the games that we've seen than Mikey Moore has, in my opinion. And that's really frustrating, because we knocked back the opportunity for him to go to Kelly, I think it was, to get games which would really help him develop, because he was going to be involved in the first team. And since then, you know, he's been a bit part player at best. And that to me comes down to bad management as well, because we've got players there that are in unnatural positions that we're trying to shoehorn into a team, when we've probably got players there that could take their position in their more natural position. So I think both things can equally be true. The manager is a dud, but the players also need to check their attitude and mentality before they go onto that pitch, because it isn't good enough. You know, the manager can't make them chase a man, win a 50-50, close down space, etc. That's on the players, and that's where they need to take the responsibility for it.
Yeah, agreed. And Sheryl, I'm going to come to you in 2 minutes. I shouldn't let it go sort of unannounced. Big Rod has gifted 10-fold lads memberships. Thanks, Big Rod. We really appreciate that. And Dougie and Cheryl's uncle Andy has been listening again. There's a lot to hate in life, but Dougie and Sheryl ate a breakfast of fresh air. I love that sort of stuff. And listen, Andy, he's a sort of super subscriber and has donated £10 this time. We're really grateful for that. Sheryl, Chris Boyd did allude to the fact that some of the experienced guys that we spoke about there, your James Taverniers, your Butlins, your John Souters, the leadership guys, if you like, I think they've been referred to, almost have a ceiling. And are they there? Is, I guess what I'm asking you, can they do anything more as a Rangers sort of unit, if you like?
No, but this is not new information, Scott. We've lacked leaders in this team, don't know, 3 years. So this is not something new. And I remember we were all quite excited about, what was it, Connor Cody? That was going to come in because he did seem to fit that profile. Somebody in at the back, a leader, somebody very vocal. I've mentioned it on the pod before, but I found an interview that I think it was Billy Dodds did when it was either Billy Dodds or Neil McCann. Somebody on the BBC had asked them about, you know, who are your leaders? What will be happening? I think it was after a defeat. What will be happening in that dressing room today? And the response was, well, Jack Butland will maybe see a wee bit, and then Tav will maybe see a wee bit. That's as much as we're getting. We need leadership. We haven't had leadership within that team for a very, very, very long time. And look, the point that Dougie made in terms of Tav is right. We look better when he is on the pitch. He brings a small bit of leadership. He will talk to people. He'll organise things. But we need far more than that, and we've needed it for years as well. John Souttar, Rangers John Souttar, seems to be completely different from Scotland John Souttar. But again, he's not what we need. We need somebody vocal. We need somebody that's going to be able to grab the game by the scruff of the neck. We need leaders that are going to let these players know exactly what we're about. It shouldn't be up to us as a support. We should have these leaders within their squad that have guys up against the wall saying this is not good enough.
Yes.
Do you know, but we don't, we're too nice. Nobody really seems to be that angered by what's going on. I've seen lots of people making reference to the Tav going right up the tunnel. We know that maybe the only one that we have is Nico Raskin. We know that there's been rumours that he's challenged Russell Martin so far about his style of play, etc. But that's all that we have. And it's a damning indictment on the state of the team at the moment and the leadership, or non-existent leadership.
So you speak about Tav, and I would love to know who it was. I genuinely would love to know who it was who thought, win, lose or draw, at the end, we're going to go right round the pitch and applaud everyone. Even if we get pumped, we're going to take the opportunity to go around and applaud everyone, I assume, for coming to the game, which I get. The first time they don't do that after a bad game, it's a bad look because it looks like they've went up the tunnel in a huff. And I'll be honest with you, when I saw Tav disappearing up the tunnel, my instant reaction was, all the rest of his players are away applauding the support. Why is he not there as captain? He should be there. Now, the argument to that is he probably doesn't have to, but because they've started it, at the end of every game, it's something they need to do. There's an argument for, do you know what I mean? Shake all your buddies' hands, make sure you get the opposition, officials if you choose to do so, and get straight up the tunnel. You don't need to go around everyone and applaud everyone, but we have to do it now, win, lose or draw, because we started it once. And the minute Tav goes straight up the tunnel, I don't think it's a good look because of the impression that's being created by doing that post-match walkout. Dougie, I can see you on hot bricks there.
You know, I just hope that it's because he's determined to get up the tunnel first, to be the first person to go and kick Russell Martin up the dick avocado.
Do you know, he's not though. So I agree with what you're saying, right? But see if in all the times that and I don't have a problem with James Tavernier, I'll always compare him to all the successful Rangers captains that I've seen since I started supporting the club. That's his problem. And I think a lot of other supporters are in exactly the same place. However, one thing that James Tavernier does not give me the impression of is that he's a shouty captain. He doesn't give me an angry captain, or he's not going to take the paint off the walls. So he never did
a Q&A night years ago with Stephen Gerrard, and he was asked why James Tavernier is his captain, and he cut across straight away and said, there are different types of captains, and I've played under different types of captains. At England alone, I had John Terry, for example, who's the very vocal captain, and then I had David Beckham, who's the lead by example on the pitch and work his arse off type of captain, Greece being the big moment for David Beckham, right? James Tavernier is the latter. I just keep going on about it, right? There has been certain games where James Tavernier is the one who has dragged us through the game. He's not the shouty captain. He's the lead by example captain. He worked his arse off today, by the way, and he's the one who won his last trophy. He's the one who got us to a European Cup final, blah, 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 right? The problem with James Tavernier is not James Tavernier. It's the rest of the team around about him. Sheryl nailed it in the head when she said there's not enough leaders in that team. That's not James Tavernier's fault. If you throw a Richard Gough and a Barry Ferguson into that Rangers team right now, and all of a sudden you've got James Tavernier leading by example, you've got, Big Goughy at the back, bullying everyone, henning everything, shouting at everyone, organising the defence, and Barry Ferguson doing the same in the middle of the park, we do not have the problems that we have right now. That's recruitment. We're signing too many boys, too many project players. We need to have a real good balance. I understand that we're going to have to sign players to develop them and move them on in the future for increased fees, because that's how the model's going to be. But we're going to have to get guys around them that know what it takes to win football matches. And unfortunately, at this moment in time, we don't have enough of them. And by the way, we've not even spoken about the fact that we went and spent £3.5 million on a central defender, a key position that needed strengthened, and he's not even involved in the matchday squad. And actually, whilst I'm away ranting, right, our top signings of the summer, Shermite, Asgard, Fernandez, Antman, right, they're our top financial outlays, all on the bench or not even in the squad. What does that tell you about the recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, I on the recruitment, I don't disagree. I think it's very hard to look at the recruitment that's been made in the summer and think anything other than very negatively of it. I think in every position that we've sort of upgraded, I think there's an argument for us upgrading, to be perfectly honest with you. And yeah, listen, as far as I'm concerned, the James Tavernier thing is just a thing that's going to continue to roll on until he leaves Rangers, to be perfectly honest with you. And whether that is leaving with one more medal, whether it's with a league medal, a Scottish Cup medal, it is just going to continue, I'm afraid, because he hasn't won enough as Rangers captain. The facts and figures will back that up.
We'll be arguing about it when we're old men and we're Sheryl's age, Scott.
Well, that's exactly true. I'm glad you said that. And you're lucky she's hungover, because I'm sure she would have you for it.
No, sorry, straight back in. But you'll still, I might be older, but you look much older.
Hide the hairline.
Right, enough on the hairlines. Rob, I think it's easy to forget that we had a game today.
Did we?
frankly, it was really awful. I stayed just around the corner from the Falkirk Stadium, and I was quite aware that the Falkirk fans going back and forward to the game were right up for it. We made a few changes. Cornelius was moving across to left back. Magoma was pumped onto the bench. And we had that sort of a three in midfield: Raskin, Rothwell, and Barron, and the front three, Majowski, who it seems like Majowski and Chermiti are going to be rotated a little bit. Chermiti for the big games when we don't need to score, and Majowski for the games that we hope to score. Team lineup, did it surprise you? The rotation, I know you've spoke about Curtis maybe not being involved, which surprised you, and Moore indeed being involved. Was there anything missing from there other than you thought we could have done with him in there, or we could have changed the formation slightly?
It's a difficult one. I think the Moore inclusion was a surprise given how ineffective he's been. I think that was one of the ones that jumped straight out to me. Not really surprised that Barron, Rothwell and Raskin, you could maybe argue Dio could have come back into the team after the suspension and been out for a couple of games. But for me, it was good to see Rothwell given a chance, maybe a bit further up the pitch again, to see if he could influence the game. But ultimately, for us, it seems to be the defence that's the shape in the defence that's the worry in this team, because the natural balance that Cornelius had at that left centre half is then taken away as soon as you move him out to left back and you stick Suter in there again, and that was kind of what everybody was worried about. That as soon as we needed somebody to go back into that left back spot, you've only got Magoma or Cornelius to fit in there on occasion when he's not fit. So I think that was maybe the only surprise. You knew that there wasn't going to be any change in shape because it's Russell Martin and he doesn't tend to do that sort of thing in the first half. It's usually at half time when he realises that he needs to abandon his plan that he'll change things up. And for me, it comes back to that hunger and desire bit that we keep talking about. Falkirk for that first 25 minutes, half an hour, wanted it more. And the only reason that we were still in that game was because of Jack Butland. And that's probably the only person actually that has improved under Russell Martin, because he's had to face so many bloody shots in this team. So maybe we can put that as a positive of the Russell Martin era, is that he's managed to get Jack Butland back saving shots at goal for Rangers. But I mean, you could make an argument that Asgard could be in the team, but ultimately none of them are setting the header alight. And for us, it doesn't matter who's in that team. We're not creating anything, and that's the biggest challenge that we've got just now. We create things when the players have a bit more freedom and things are abandoned. So the first half, when you see that lineup and you see the shape that we take, that it's not going to be good, because we've seen it time and time again.
The manager said post-match that one of his regrets that he maybe look back on and think he would do differently is maybe certain players deserve more minutes. I'm going to say this right now, right? Nobody deserves any more minutes because nobody has earned the right to be on that pitch. Correct. See the guys that you're talking about, Rob, in terms of Diamande and Asgard in particular, are the guys that potentially could have been in that team. It's not on merit. It's on what we think their ability levels are. We know there's a player in Diamande, but he's not shown it this season. We think there's a player in Asgard because we've heard that there's a player in Asgard from his previous clubs, and we've seen him rattle in 4 goals in 23 minutes for his international team.
You don't get in that. You don't get in that Norwegian team by being a bad player, mate. And I think that's the biggest problem and the frustration that we've got as fans at the moment. You could, as Stevie always says, you could put Erling Haaland in that team at the moment as a striker, and it wouldn't make a difference.
But do you know what I would argue though, and as particularly as Asgard's concerned, everyone went mad when he scored 4 goals in international duty. Everyone went mental and instantly thought, the answer to our problems, make sure he plays at the weekend. And I don't think we've seen it with him. He's got fantastic hair, a big boy, by all accounts can strike the ball, but I've yet to see anything that, easy Sheryl, I've yet to see anything that suggests to me that he's going to be in the same way that I've yet to see anything that suggests that Russell Martin's going to be a successful Rangers manager, I've yet to see from many of the players that have come in the summer that they're going to be successful Rangers footballers.
But did you hear him after that Norwegian game? I think it was the interview with Rangers TV. They were asking him how it was being away in international duty and what his best position is, and he said the left 8 is where I play best. And where did he play in that next game? In the right hand side, in an alien position that the manager has decided to put him in there. So that's what I mean. We can blame the players, and absolutely the players need to take responsibility when they step in that pitch. But equally, if you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, it's not going to work. And that's part of the frustration. I think part of the problem for the players as well is they're getting judged on the decisions that the manager's making at the moment on their future when he's playing them in wrong positions. The same with Dio. Dio sometimes has been deployed in that holding midfield role when we all thought that he was going to go back to the Norstalin roaming forward 8, linking up play, running on behind the strikers. But he's not been able to do that. He's been asked to go out to left wing or right wing as a player so that the wingers can cut, and it's just mental. Correct. So I think there's a lot that we need to look at from a system point of view that the players just aren't used to doing. And absolutely they need to take responsibility for the performances, but it's a mixture of both. Sorry.
No, I agree. Okay, last 10 minutes. Sheryl, see there's an announcement tomorrow to suggest that Rangers have indeed parted company with the great man. Who are you bringing in?
Do you know what? I have no idea. I have huge worries around it. I have no faith in the leadership to bring in somebody that we need. We heard that this guy, Russell Martin, had 7 interviews, which would then lead you to believe that was a very robust process, that he knew what he was coming into, he'd impressed them, they had this plan that they had really bought into, and they've made an absolute arse of it. So my faith in them to bring somebody in, I'm really, really worried about it. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm so sorry, Scotty. I've got no idea who we should bring in because I'm just so concerned that they will not do a good job.
Do you know, I'm exactly the same. And I think it's the easy go-to is Steven Gerrard for all the obvious reasons, which we know about and we spoke about to death. Dougie, I don't think you think he would be the answer, do you?
No, I don't know. I keep kind of jumping between them, Scott, if I'm honest. What I don't want is another one of these managers that's got a plan A and plan B is to do plan A better. That just doesn't work here. So I don't want, I've seen Graham Potter's name in the chat. I don't want someone like Graham Potter. I think the 3 that I mentioned earlier on are going to be in contention. Gerrard, Muscat and Deitch. I think Muscat becomes more difficult than the other 2 because he's in a job just now. It might be more difficult to get him. We had the opportunity to get him a while back when we appointed Clement and chose not to go for him. So we obviously overlooked him at that point, but he's been on and been more successful again. My worry about Gerrard in particular is just what I like about Gerrard. Right? I think the bit I like about him is we lack leadership on the pitch. I don't have entire faith in the leadership in the senior positions at Rangers when you think of Thelwell, Purdy and Stewart. I think we need to sign a leader as a manager, somebody who's not the first team coach. I think we need to appoint somebody who's going to come in and really tell everybody this is what we are doing and show real leadership from the first day. Steven Gerrard would do that. Where I have a bit nervousness around Steven Gerrard is we do look back in the Steven Gerrard era with a little bit of blue-tinted glasses. There was points in the Steven Gerrard time that things were not great. We won 55, and that was a brilliant league campaign, but we were knocked out of the cup twice in a one-horse race. We should have won a treble that year. I get that the goal was to stop 10 in a row. It was to win 55, and he did that. But there was a few holes in Steven Gerrard, and I think when Gio came in, particularly from a European perspective, he's seen how that team could be evolved and played a little bit differently. So I'm a wee bit nervous about Gerrard, but I think the unfortunate thing right now is there's no obvious candidates. A little bit like transfers, people keep on talking about when Walter Smith came back for the second time and he brought in a bunch of guys. like Weir, McCullough, Naismith, Thompson, Boyd. You know, he brought in this Scottish core, and then when Gerrard came in, he signed McGregor, Arfield, Davis. You know, he brought in all these cores. There's no obvious manager, there's no obvious signings just now, and I think that's the only thing that kind of goes against me. So I was going to say you almost need to trust the leadership to appoint the right guy, but I'm with Sheryl. I don't trust him at all.
Do you know that way? I see a couple of guys have actually clearly been speaking to my missus because she also suggested Ted Lasso, which I think which is quite, what I do think, by the way, and I may be wrong, and I'm only taking into account because we've obviously got American owners now. I do, and there's a Leeds link here as well, Rob. I do wonder if they would consider the guy Jesse Marsh that was there for a wee while. And listen, let's be honest, we're not going to go to another team and bring in someone. So our new manager, I think, is going to have to be someone who is sitting about dormant just now, really not doing anything and looking for work. So there's some very obvious candidates there. Gerrard is the obvious one. I think there's backgrounds to sort of changes in his family life recently that probably makes him not as much a favourite as maybe it's what we'd like. But Rob, is there anyone that sort of jumps out at you as an obvious candidate? I think it's a hard call just now. I really do.
It is, and you know, I'm glad that Patrick Stewart is looking for opinions on who we should appoint as manager. So hopefully he's listening to the show tonight and he can take some of our suggestions on board. No, I mean, I think you're right. The only thing I would disagree with, Scotty, is it depends on the club you're approaching for their manager if they would want to come here or not, and whether we could strike a deal. So I wouldn't be too hung up on that. But I mean, for me, the obvious link is going to be the Dyche one because he's obviously worked with Thelwell and the Everton crew. I think he would actually be a decent manager. The one thing that always stuck out to me, if you listen to Scotty Arfield, when he talked about managers in the pre-seasons that he played under, Dyche was the toughest, he always said. So you know you're going to get an organised, hard-working team under him, which is the things that we really want at the moment, because we're disorganised and don't work. You know, I think Gerrard, he would come back in and set standards again, because ultimately that's what he did when he took over. And he was like the figurehead of the club at that point, and I think that's what we need. We need somebody like that has got the gravitas to actually lead the club rather than a head coach that isn't involved in the signings as much as you potentially want to be and doesn't have as much control over anything else. I think I've seen somebody mention Knutson as a good option. The danger is he's probably making too much money from the signings and stuff that he gets currently, which means he's not going to want to come and manage us. So I think it's really difficult to look at who's going to come in and be able to turn this squad round, because that's ultimately what we need in the short term. We need somebody just to come in and get them playing as a unit and working. And it doesn't need to be fancy football. You know, we were taken in by the descriptions and, you know, the style of play that we heard about. Muscat is obviously a good shout as well, because again, he's won things. He's been pretty successful the last few jobs, but how realistic is it that he's going to leave before December? So are we going to wait that long before we appoint somebody? I'm just glad that I'm not going to have to do the headhunting for that role, because it's going to be a short list, I think, unfortunately.
Do you know when? Sorry, Dougie, on you.
No, I was going to say, there's obviously, like, to one of the points Rob made there about, you know, it doesn't need to be the glamorous appointment. There's a lot of people calling out the likes of Derek McInnes and Stephen Robinson in the comments about they know the league, they can set teams up well. Would they be, so that's a question, right? Would they be the equivalent of appointing Alex McLeish post Dick Advocat, where you had the kind of glamorous manager, you've then brought in a manager that knows the league? Do you think we should go down that route? Or I've seen Andy comment earlier on saying, what's the point in cheaping out the manager if you're spending £8 million on a centre forward? There's money there. We should be bringing in a bigger name. It doesn't need to be somebody who's at a club. It's about bringing in a bigger name. You know, someone mentioned Gareth Southgate, for example. I'm not advocating Gareth Southgate, right? But you'd then be bringing in the former England manager who would come in with that gravitas, who knows how to organise a team. Where's your head at just now in terms of the type of manager? Would you go with someone that knows the league, or would you go with someone who actually, do you know what, it's another bit of a gamble?
So without sounding standard. Any appointment you make now for us is going to be a gamble, because he's going to be, whoever it is going to come in and take over us at a really, really shitty, excuse my French, time. So the only way has to be up. Literally, the only way has to be up. It cannot be any other way. And I think over the course of the week, you're going to, I personally think Gareth Southgate ain't too bad a shout. The only thing I would say is, I almost think he's bigger than your Thelwells and your Stewart, which I think makes it sound almost a bit unrealistic. You don't know how it would work with the sort of Thelwell role working above him. So Southgate, I think, would be a great appointment. I think you will, over time. Graham Potter's now free. I think Graham Potter and Billy Reid will be mentioned pretty openly. Billy Reid's a huge Rangers man, so I suspect that will be sort of brought up. Newton I would love to have, however, considering he's looking after a team in the Champions League, it ain't happening. And this is really the problem that we find ourselves in just now. If, as I think we expect, there's going to be an announcement tomorrow to say that we are officially managerless, there is no outstanding candidates. There is nobody that jumps up and you can instantly think, you know what, he's the man. He'll get us back to a stage where we can be happy about winning games. We can watch the team and see patterns they play. We can understand a methodology of what we are looking to do, because at the moment, and since the start of the season, it hasn't been evident. And there's no doubt in my mind, moving forward, it absolutely has to change. That feels like quite a sensible place for us to end. We are back at the tail end of the international break. Sheryl, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for the group therapy. It was as enjoyable as talking about Rangers can be at the moment. Thank you.
And Rob, good to see you, buddy. Thanks for jumping on, buddy.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Nice to chat.
And Dougie, always good to have you back on as well, mate.
Thank you. I can't believe you just stopped there with the management chat. I was getting ready to start talking about Graham Souness advocating Frank Lampard back in the day. I think Coventry are now top of the Championship. So we need guys like Graham Souness involved in the recruitment. It'd be good if we did bring someone like Graham Souness into the advisory board again when we're looking at new managers, because we can't rely on guys like Patrick Stewart. But no, good to be back on. We've had Pedro Nabush over in Luxembourg. We've now got Russell Martin and Falkirk getting huckled into the back of a car and snuck out of the city. So hopefully this is as low as it's going to get. And on to the next 24 hours, because I don't believe Russell Martin will be the Rangers manager by the time the guys have the flagship show tomorrow.
Yeah, listen, an embarrassing day for the football club. Quite a sorry state it feels like we're in just now. Before I let everyone depart, we should say thanks to partners: Black Rooster, CSD Air Conditioning, Athol Industrial Solutions, Rhino Express and Clydeview Joinery, iSport Media, who look after the Sunday show for the duration of the season. We're really grateful for their help. Tomorrow, for the weekly flagship, Stevie, Kenny and David are back. Right said Baldy. I don't know when they start tomorrow, but they're definitely here tomorrow. And I am actually standing in for Stevie on Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock and Friday night at whatever time it is we start. So you will see me a couple of times next week. From Sunday show status, we are back 2 weeks today when the international break has been and gone. And I imagine, if we're reading all the signs correctly, we will have a new manager in charge. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please follow the podcast right across the social media platforms. You know where we are. Make sure you do it. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Good night.
The Four Lads podcast is sponsored by Rhino Express, Clydeview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions Limited and CSD Air Conditioning in partnership with Black Rooster and Art of Gold. Thank you for listening to or watching the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.